3 years ago, I found a town by accident that isn't on any maps. My problem started when I was pulled over for my tail lights being out. All of them, and the brake lights, so I guessed. And when I finally had it repaired, it turned out there was a problem with the wiring. It wasn't just a bulb out or something. The officer let me off with a warning. I decided to get off the interstate and stop for the night in the closest town so I could get it fixed first thing in the morning. I was about 2 days into a drive out to the West Coast, in Arizona at that point, and I didn't want to have to deal with a ticket several states over if I got stopped again. I never thought my decision would lead to what it did, something much worse than some civil ticket. It passed a few more exits, looking for a good place to stop, my headlights illuminating the exit signs. It wasn't but 30 miles, so I spotted one of those signs saying there was a town 20 miles off the interstate. It wasn't very well maintained and didn't have that retro-reflective coating they usually do. But it was about 2 a.m., and I was ready to stop, so I decided to risk it. I grossly underestimated how reckless it can be to stop in an unknown town based on random signs. I drove down the lonely country road for about 10 or 20 minutes, until I came to a fork in the road. There wasn't any signage about which way to go, so I chose what to me seemed random. Though honestly, I do not know if I believe in random these days, and headed down the left-hand road. It didn't take long for some regret to set in. The road went from worn asphalt to gravel to dirt over the course of like 2 miles. It was a narrow road without really anywhere good to turn around, so I just went with it. I passed through a thick, foggy stretch, which I guess I wasn't really expecting in a desert. But I really do not know enough about fog to say anything beyond it creeped me out, personally. Almost as abruptly as the fog set in, it faded out. And as it did, I finally saw signs of life, some lights in the distance. I passed one of those welcome signs with the name of the place. I don't know if I should say what it was, so I think I'll just leave it out for now. It was a pretty small town. Really only a main street and a couple of offshoots that didn't go far. On the main street there was a hotel, the only hotel. Judging by the sign on the building, it was also just named hotel. I parked and went in, so tired I didn't even bother to grab any of my bags. I was greeted by a slender, bald man with dark bags under his sunken eyes. He greeted me in a friendly enough tone, but it didn't look at me. I mean, he looked in my direction, but he wasn't looking at me, if you know what I mean. He was looking through me. It crashed as soon as I get up to my room. I slept in late the next morning. I had intended to get up early, but between getting in so late and the changing time zones, it was more like noon by the time I had gotten up and grabbed a shower. In the light of day, I noticed how odd my room was. It looked more like my grandmother's house in a standard hotel. There wasn't even a TV, just a radio. I set out to find somewhere to get lunch and then see about my car. I tried looking somewhere up on my phone, but the town didn't seem to be showing up on my map, and Google didn't really have any results for it either. Went down and asked at the front desk. It was the same bald man as the night before, looking as tired as ever. He directed me to a small restaurant a few blocks down. As I was leaving, he asked about my plans, if I was checking out, and looked disappointed when I told him it depended on my car. The weather was nice, so it was a pleasant walk down the street to the little diner. The town looked as antiquated as the hotel. The signs and traffic lights were in an old style, but they looked clean and well maintained. The diner was nice, though like everything else wasn't an old style. Even the prices looked like they were retro, like the land inflation forgot. The food was good though, kind of surprisingly good, though my fellow patrons kept giving me strange, not very friendly glances and stares, which kind of made it hard to fully enjoy my meal. The waitress was the only friendly person in there, a nice older lady. She made friendly small talk, asked where I was from, what I was doing there, how long I was staying. I didn't think much of it at the time. It blended in with the rest of the small talk, but we got to talking about the weather. She looked serious but still friendly, and warned me that even though the weather was nice now, a big storm was supposed to roll into town that evening after dark. I thanked her for the warning and reassured her I would take care. On the walk back to pick up my car to drive over to the auto shop, an expensive-looking white car, I couldn't tell the make or model. Passed by me, slowing almost to a stop as it rolled past me. All the well-dressed man within in a white suit stared me down with a grin. I waved to him, but he ignored the gesture and just went on with whatever he was doing. Drove over to the mechanic's shop. The singular mechanic seemed annoyed that I was there, but he patiently listened to my description of my problem. He speculated about the cause, something technical that went in one ear and out the other. I think he could see that he was losing me, and stopped partway through a sentence and directly stated he probably wouldn't be able to have it fixed until tomorrow. I told him that'd be fine, I wasn't in any particular rush. He didn't seem too happy with that response. He started in on trying to convince me that wouldn't it be better to just drive to my destination and get it repaired there. When I reassured him that I wasn't in any particular hurry, he started trying to convince me that I should drive to the next town over, said it was nicer, and there was more to do. I could tell he was trying to get rid of me. I knew at the time that it'd be best to take that kind of hint, but for some reason, maybe just because he seemed like a jerk, I pushed him on it until he ran out of vague, non-confrontational reasons I should go elsewhere and agree to work on it for me. I walked away from him. He called out to me, telling me that if I was staying in town, I should make sure to hunker down. Said some bad weather would be rolling in. I was a bit confused at the time. He would warn me about the weather after being so hostile to me in every other way. I walked around town exploring until it got dark, and then returned to my hotel to eat snacks in my room and watch Netflix on my phone. I decided to hit the crib early to catch up on some sleep. As I was getting ready for bed, I realized that I had forgotten to grab my toiletries bag from my car before I dropped it off at the shop. I went down to the front desk to ask for a toothbrush, since sometimes they'll have cheap disposable ones for guests. When I got down to the lobby, I found the bald man had apparently forsaken his post. I tried ringing the little bell on the front desk in vain. I wasn't in any particular hurry, so I opted to hang around in the lobby for a bit to see if the proprietor would return to his station. After a few minutes of waiting, I stepped outside to take a look at the infamous storm that I had been warned about. The night air was stagnant and warm, more like a stuffy room than fresh night air. There also wasn't a cloud in the sky. What there was a steady stream of people walking past me down the middle of the street towards the town square. Not a single one of them made eye contact with me, and they ignored me when I tried to ask them if there was some sort of event going on. They took no notice of me or their surroundings. Just walked straight ahead, eyes forward. I felt a strange compulsion to follow them. Not any sort of magic-type compulsion, really just my ordinary curiosity. So, I followed them. I walked on the sidewalk, parallel to them walking down the middle of the street. After a few minutes of walking, we came to their apparent destination. A large crowd had gathered around a sort of wooden stage in the middle of the town square, right out front the courthouse. On the stage were a few men, one dressed in a fine white suit, one in a regular suit, and one wearing what looked like a suit made of sackcloth. I recognized the man in the white suit as the man who had driven past me earlier that day, slowly in his fancy car. I stood in the back and watched for a few minutes. No one in the crowd paid any attention to me. They were all staring up at the stage. I assumed I was waiting for something to start. The only person who seemed to acknowledge my existence was the man on the stage, in the white suit. He was staring right at me with a wide grin. He was the only one there that night with any sort of expression on his face. A few minutes later, as the stream of arrivals became more of a trickle, the white suit man and the others walked to the front of the stage and began to address the crowd. He began by thanking them for once again welcoming him into their town, and that he was happy to provide them with his services, as agreed upon. He looked at my section of the crowd as he continued, saying that he hoped everyone in the crowd would find the ceremony as edifying as he will. He motions to several men next to the stage to bring up a wooden table. It looked poorly made, or maybe it was just improvisation, like they had taken a wooden door and bolt legs onto it. The man in sackcloth then laid face down on the table, and the man in the white suit began chanting something. Sounded kind of like Latin. I began to realize what I'm sure by now is clear to you as well, that this was some sort of ritual, and that the townsfolk had not wanted me to attend. I slowly backed out of the crowd towards the direction of the garage. I did not want to see things go how I thought they would. I got out of the crowd without any trouble, but when I turned around to walk back to my car, I heard the eccentric celebrant pause his chanting and call out to me, saying something to the effect of leaving so soon. Why not stay for our little ceremony? I didn't even turn around. I continued walking, trying to just ignore him. I didn't quite catch what it was, but he said something to the crowd. But I heard several people from the crowd start running towards me. Looking over my shoulder, I saw the bald man leading 2 or 3 others toward me. I broke out into a full-blown sprint towards the auto shop. As we ran, me in front and them slowly gaining on me, I heard the innkeeper calling to me in a calm, relaxed voice, despite the fact that we were all running as fast as we could, that he hoped I was enjoying my stay, and that checkout was 11 a.m. I guess in his sick, twisted mind, he thought reminding me of the formalities of a hotel stay would convince me to wait so I could go through the proper process in the morning. I reached into my pocket to ready my car keys as I rounded the corner onto the street of the mechanics. Luckily, my car was still out front. I managed to get in it, but they caught up to me before I was able to close and lock the door. The bald man grabbed hold of my arm as I was trying to shut the door and began to try to pull me out. The others joined his effort as they caught up. It felt like they were going to pull my arm off, but I managed to use my leg to brace myself against the frame of the door. I was able to start the car with my free hand and shift into gear. I slammed on the gas. I heard and felt a sickening pop as the weight of my would-be captors dragged along as I drove, dislocating my shoulder. As I got up to speed, I felt the pull rapidly decrease as one by one, the men who were holding on to me lost their grips. With my one working arm, I drove as fast as I could away from that town and back to the interstate. The pain was almost unbearable as the rough dirt road jostled my car, and by extension, my limp, dislocated arm hanging at my side. I made it back to the highway where I was promptly pulled over for speeding and a lack of taillight. The deputy who pulled me over looked horrified when I told him where I had just come from. He called an ambulance for me, but when I asked him if he was going to get people down to that town to save the men in sackcloth and arrest the men who attacked me, he stared me directly in the eye and shook his head. I tried to argue with him, but he refused to acknowledge anything I said about that town after that town. As they loaded me into the ambulance, he told me that it would be best if I never mentioned that town or where it was to anyone else. They were aware of it, and it would be best not to draw any more attention to it. Stay out of their business, and hope they stay out of ours.